as we invite our speakers to take the stage. A round of applause for Mr. Vishnu Rajiv, Investment Partner, Special Invest. Can we have a big round of applause, ladies and gentlemen? Someone who backs breakthrough deep tech startups and, of course, shaping India's innovation frontier. Welcome, sir. A round of applause for Ms. Ashwini Asokan, founder and CEO of Mad Street Den. A leading AI entrepreneur, Ashwini is building globally recognized artificial intelligence products from India. Welcome. Next, I'd like to welcome on stage Mr. Srinath Ravichandran, co-founder and CEO of Agnikul Cosmos, redefining India's private space ambitions. And rounding out our panel, Dr. Venkata Krishnan, Senior Vice President, AI Partnerships, Inference, working at the intersection of AI and enterprise innovation. Welcome. And our moderator, of course, Srinam Srinivasan, former group digital editor at the Hindu Group, bringing deep media and technology insight to this discussion. It should be an interesting one. Sriram, over to you.
Thanks for coming. And wanted to start off by talking about what we are. And there was a lot of buzz about startups 1.5 decades ago, and in the last few years there has been a lot of buzz about deep tech. And in fact, just last 2 weeks we heard a lot from the government about what a deep tech startup means. And the Tamil Nadu government also has come up with certain policies around this. I want to actually talk about what the city needs and what the city has already. But no better than these 4 people to highlight their journeys, because by the time the buzz about deep tech became really loud and noisy, we could see that the 4 people here have already, have done many years of their journeys into this sphere. And actually I want to start off with Ashwini. And I think about a decade back you talked about Mad Street Den, and at the time I remember a quote where you said that we are proud to say that this is made in Madras, right? And maybe you can highlight the journey itself with all its nuances. Maybe we can take it from there.
We came back to Chennai in 2013-14 to start this company. Mad Street Den was India's first, I think, AI startup at that time, and we were very heavily, when we started our journey in the computer vision, image recognition space, when we began this journey, right? And deep learning was just starting to be a thing at that point. And there was a lot of debate between, so my co-founders, my husband, there was a lot of debate between the two of us. We'd had a career in semiconductor, in AI, in neuroscience, between the two of us. And where do we begin, right? And everybody told us, if you're starting up and you're going back home from the valley, you go to Bangalore. And we'd never lived anywhere else in India. So we actually moved back to Bangalore in 2013. We didn't move to Chennai. That lasted 6 months. We picked up the family, we picked up everything. Hiring was an absolute nightmare, I remember. You'd place offers, people would get the offers and not show up to work, right? We found the fundamental just work ethic itself shocking at that point. I'm talking, a while ago, 12, 13 years ago. And which is when we packed up and we said, this is not going to work, let's just go home, right? And we landed in Chennai in 2014. And our first hire was someone from VIT, right, Vellore. We very quickly then started saying, okay, what we need here is, there's a fundamental lack of understanding of, AI, computer vision, image recognition, deep learning at that point. And we said, okay, why don't we actually create a program which is centered around bringing people straight out of undergrad into the company. And, both my co-founders were professors, almost professors. And so the mindset as we started building Mad Street Den was very much around, we're going to build it like a training program, right? For 4 years, people are going to stay here. And by the end of 4 years, you'd have essentially built out an entire portfolio of AI work foundational work. We're not talking applied AI, because this is back in the day, there was not a whole lot of applied AI at that point. And we would use our foundational work in specific applications as we build it out, and build this kind of, talent and keep this engine going. And so a lot, when we sold the company a year ago, we had put 1,300 people through MSD over 10 years. And the 1,300 people that we had put through were all AI, right? So it didn't matter if you came from marketing or a product, or it didn't matter what background you came into the company. When you left the company, you were a technical AI person to begin with. It didn't matter what kind of a role you came into the company. So fundamentally, we started shifting the work people were doing to, this is not just, marketing is just not going out there and talking about what you're doing. Marketing is actually about understanding how you use AI and explaining it to people who are potential customers so that they get to adopt it, right? So our marketing people were AI experts, our sales people were AI experts. If you didn't know how to build and use the systems we were building at MSD, you didn't really get through the company for the most part, right? So, and as we went through this journey, one of the things we found was people who ended up staying for 4 years typically ended up staying for 10 years, right? And then there was another cohort. It just split into two cohorts. The other cohort was kids who wanted to go and do their master's or PhD after this, right? So there was between the three of us, we have a lot of degrees, fortunately or unfortunately. And so there was this, okay, we've been here for 4 years. Can you help us get a PhD or a master's? Was like a kind of another path that a lot of them can. And today, MSD's first 50 employees are actually one of the first 50 employees of OpenAI, one of the first 100 employees of Apple AI, right? So that group that ended up going to the US for some degree, unfortunately for us, didn't come back. And I think that also reflects how successful some of those companies were, right? And they went on to become. And so I think one of the biggest things about our journey as an organization, as we've become as we became kind of a horizontal platform, so we ended up being an enterprise AI company over the course of 10 years, serving retail, finance, insurance, government, like we were powering the government of Dubai, government of Argentina's, work around the world. And it became such an opportunity for people from very varied backgrounds, right, to come in. You probably heard this a million times, but it was also a company with 50% women, right? So it was a big push for us to say, it didn't matter what background you're in, as long as you have the appetite to come in and learn AI tools and become AI literate, this place becomes a place where you become a part of it, right? So we are very strong believers. I think Gaurav was talking about, foundational systems, and, it takes time. This stuff takes time. It can't happen overnight. The fortunate thing as we've gone through this journey is that we've actually figured out a formula for what works, right? That's the positive thing in terms of building the deep tech talent inside the city. The negative thing, unfortunately, is, people do get the hub of activity, unfortunately, for tech and AI is not Chennai, right? So whether it's founders or talent, if you pay them something here, Bangalore will give you 3x more, right? And the Valley, for example, there are companies hiring, Valley companies hiring in Bangalore. And the people that are going out of here are all from Chennai, right? You can go to any organization and see they'll all be from Chennai, right? So at some level, I think there is, and these are people who are very passionate about Chennai. Let me also say this, especially given the last couple of rounds that have happened. The people I work with, I have worked with, that I live with, my family, extended circles, people are ridiculously invested in terms of Chennai. But unfortunately, in this field, the money is being made elsewhere, right? And I think it's a question of time. I think the whole Freshworks story, ChargeBee, there's a lot of ripple effect that has happened. But I think we need a ton more investment in the space of AI and deep tech in Chennai in order for us for this to become a real hub of meaningful, size and proportion. So
that's very interesting, and interesting to know that you were actually based elsewhere, Bangalore, when you started out, and you had a choice to continue there. Srinath, you must have had a lot of choices that way. You went from Guindy to Columbia to Illinois, and then came back to Chennai. What was the thought process at that time, and why did you want to sort of course, space is a very different game. Even in 2017, it would have been really difficult to sort of build this idea. And why Chennai, and what is the journey like?
Yeah, thanks for having me here. So, we build rockets, and for rockets, there's a lot of hardware and academia support that we wanted in the very early days. Particularly as none of the founders really were rocket scientists, we needed a tag, also, right? So, the search. So I was in LA when I decided there should be a rocket company, but doing it in India made a lot of sense, generally because of the way in which we build space tech in India, the way in which money would be required, and also the whole dual use angle, which means I'm always going to be one step away from the real stuff happening. So India was the clear, place. And then choosing Chennai, I would actually say it was a little more of a stroke of luck, because I cold called a whole bunch of professors and people who ran labs, which would be used for testing any part of a rocket subsystem. And the only person who entertained the thought a little happened to be a professor in Chennai, Satya Chakravarti. So that was actually more of a stroke of luck for me at that time. But what I learned subsequently is actually Chennai is a great place to be building hardware. And I don't mean like electronics hardware alone, but I mean more on, plumbing and mechanical structures, dynamic systems, not just the hardware, the PCB and the electronics hardware, right? So, because you have the ecosystems here, you have the vendor ecosystems here. And for space specifically, we have Sriharikota, which is 100 kilometers away from here, so definitely better than any other city. It's a 2.5 hour drive. And finally, I also think when you're starting to go into a cash intensive story, generally when money outflow is a little less in the early years, it's better. So that is what actually sort of came back to me after the decision was made. I just grabbed, because I was reaching out to like 100 professors across the country. Anyone who said okay was like great. I mean, I could have, for all I could have been in Kanpur or something. I don't know, no idea. I reached out to all aerodynamic departments across IITs. So I think that is what has happened. One thing I've also learned is particularly the IIT Madras ecosystem is phenomenal. So that you just feel less of an outsider when you're trying something unconventional from that system. It somehow normalizes that. So that is also good. And that validation as a founder, you're always looking for when you're trying something that at least locally no one else is trying. So those are the advantages that Chennai gave us, I think.
For a layman like me, it seemed, last few years suddenly woke up to a lot of these companies which were doing, seemingly cutting edge stuff. And I want to get to Vishnu now, essentially because Special Invest, that he's a partner of, is also invested in Agnikul. And when I actually read an interview of your colleague, Visesh, there were a number of companies across the country, not just in Chennai, which were doing cutting edge stuff. And you had woken up to this many years back. So what has it been like? To just name a few examples, there is this company called Anubal, which is using proton boron as fuel rather than uranium, right? And
No, this is fusion.
Fusion, okay. Anubal Fusion, right. Correct. And there is Sthir Energy, again, a Chennai-based company which is looking at long duration energy storage technologies, ultraviolet, which is more visible, which is into EV bikes, and which chose a harder route at getting a certification in Europe, right? So, what was happening what was the inflection point? And a lot of these startups seem to emerge from this place also because the IIT ecosystem. IIT, by the way, put out a release saying that it has funded over 500 deep tech startups in the last 12 years. So tell me more about the journey itself.
For sure. Vishesh is the founding partner. Srinath and Agnikul are the crowning jewels in our, investments. They're one of our earliest investments from Special's first fund. So Special is a deep science, deep tech focused fund. We invest at pre-seed, seed stage. So ideally like to be the first institutional investor in the deep tech startups. We invest in this whole spectrum of what people refer as deep tech. This includes space tech, climate, energy transition, mobility, industrial automation, advanced manufacturing, quantum computing, sensing, communication, different types of AI, ideally foundational AI and some very niche applications of AI, biotechnology, life sciences, and so on. And when we started, it was way back in 2017, deep tech as a phrase had not gotten any traction at all. In fact, if I remember correctly, deep tech as a phrase was first used in 2015 across the globe. It only got traction in the last few years, not just in India, across the world. And it's a very, very inorganic term, right? Like it's an amalgamation of businesses which seemingly have nothing in common other than the research part of it. It can vary from like cancer research in using gene therapy and cell therapy to building a rocket to doing something entirely different in semiconductors or robotics. So SaaS, that's a software, a business model, a subscription, all of those common elements are there. There is nothing. These are like very, very different sectors. But somehow it gives us a lingo to talk about it. We started in 2016, 2017 when nobody was talking about it. We tried calling it, this is Vishesh's and Arjun's dream project. Vishesh used to travel to Israel and, realize that we need some kind of a similar system in India to support these cutting-edge innovations. We used to refer them as frontier technologies. When we raised our first fund, the people who gave us money, our LPs, were not even willing to give us a lot of capital. So we said 50% of the capital, we'll do what we want, and 50% everything else. So if you go to our website, you'll still see some non-deep tech startups from that time. But fortunately for us, we invested in some great startups like, Agnikul, ePlane, etc. We got our early exits. We were able to return the money, convinced our investors that deep tech can also make money in India, which gave us an opportunity to pitch for a deep tech only fund in 2021, and then now very recently 2020, last year 2025, we raised our third fund, 600 crores, which is entirely on deep tech. Hopefully we'll also set up like a early growth fund in the coming years as well. But yeah, that's generally like what we do.
And do you see any reasons for why some of these are concentrated in some clusters like Chennai, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. That has been historically how startups in general and deep tech hardware, scientific stuff in particular worked. I live in Bangalore as a confession, but I heard a lot of comparison between Bangalore and how marketing projection needs to happen. Personally, I think it is the wrong way to go about it. There need not be an alternative. I mean, we should not be competing with Bangalore as such. The best example I would quote would be how Boston made itself a brand compared to Silicon Valley. Boston has a brilliant concentration of science-led innovation. I studied over there, and biotechnology, science-focused startups with MIT and Harvard being there as the focal centers. They created a very different ecosystem, a very different funding ecosystem, a very different innovation ecosystem to promote and build companies that are not getting built in the valley, or which are overlooked in the valley in its race to like blitz scale and like bring in hockey stick growths and so on. So, and that's the opportunity I think Chennai has. And that concentration is not by accident. IT Madras being here has taken a lead. That's how it will happen, and that will always happen like that. There would be like some focal centers which will come in the beginning, but then it all depends on how the ecosystem and the city comes together to support and promote the further growth.
Thanks. The Boston reference is very handy because I can go over to AJ, and he represents the frontier of AI in medicine. He works for a Boston-based startup which has a base in Bangalore. I mean, if you look at the inferences side, you will think of Indian philosophy because their products are named Anumana and Pramana, right? Inference and sources of knowledge. So I want you to also talk about the journey, but also talk about what you see from outside in terms of Chennai strengths, and also since you are based in Boston and also look at Bangalore, how would you look at these situations? What are the comparative strengths?
Happy to, Sriram. Let me first start by thanking the organizers for putting together such a fantastic event, throwing spotlight on Chennai, which is very much deserved, right? So, yes, we are a Boston-based company, but our founders are from Chennai. Boston's what I call my home, but my heart beats for Chennai, right? I make it a point to actively have roots over here and partner wherever possible, right? On the point about where the external innovation system looks at a place like Chennai, or be it the broader part in the south itself, is the kind of talent that we are able to produce, right? And it's been spoken about ad nauseum in the past two panels, and I'm sure it'll come up later in the day as well. But one thing that I'd like to draw focus to is not just generalized talent. Where we require is like specialized talent, right? In one of the earlier panels, we heard about 100,000 employees based out of one organization. That's commendable. But these are folks that can, on any given year, say work in something like quick commerce, and then immediately be able to pivot into something that's completely different, say fintech, right? But something, when it comes to medicine, it has to compound over a period of time, both the knowledge that's there in the field, as well as the regulatory understanding that's required to advance things, right? So we heard about the great work that you guys are doing in space tech. So that's one parallel, which is also a highly regulated industry. And in medicine, the reason why we've been able to do whatever we've been able to do is to actively pair the talent that's available in India with the regulatory muscle that's there in a Boston-like ecosystem. So Boston, to your point, also is this marriage of institutions, both academically grounded with industry that's readily available. That's the same template that you would see in Silicon Valley as well, right? In Boston, you have like the MITs and Harvards of the world. In Silicon Valley, you have Stanford, UCSF. And it's not just the academic institutions that are producing this talent, but are actively pushing for folks to found companies. And in the long term, the institutions are also getting equity as a part of this. So there's value creation that's happening beyond just knowledge transfer, right? The other point that I'd like to add is this foresight of being able to capture data. Tech is something you can probably beg, borrow, steal, copy, but data is something that is almost like gold. You have to like mine it. And the policies that have been there around have not necessarily pushed for data capture to happen. And in the US, in Europe, there have been mandates that have gotten people to actively capture clinical data, and as a result of which that data has compounded over years and enabled the development of new AI models. So the Pramana and Anumana references that you had was essentially ECG data, right? Digital pathology data. So when we think about tech, we're often thinking about, bots, we're thinking about, space, we're thinking about artificial intelligence, but we humans, the human body is like one of the most sophisticated pieces of tech that's like walking around. And each organ is speaking in its own language. Like we talk about large language models a lot. Sarvam AI has been able to do what it's been able to do because the data has been available, but the data that's required to build new models from humans is not getting captured actively. So ECG is one example that I mentioned, but radiology is another example. Digital pathology is another example. These are all getting collected in individual places, but they are not getting connected. You probably get your treatment at Muller hospitals, getting your diagnostics done somewhere else, and your medicines probably like in an Apollo pharmacy. But is that getting connected? So connectivity is one thing that I'd mentioned, not just generalized talent, but specialized talent. And finally, the thing that I talk about is being able to capture this data. So these are all the things that, that a US-based system or a European system is actively doing. And this is something we're beginning to see shades of this in India, and we'd like to be able to tap into this talent, bring some of this actively to Chennai, and these are plans that we're actively thinking about, and essentially have something that marries the strengths across oceans. Yeah.
Srinath, did you find enough talent which concerns space, for instance, from the city, since you're building it? Manufacturing, of course, you referred to. But what kind of, I mean, would you have a, I mean, would you want something to be done with how education and skill come together in at least in higher levels?
So it is not a Chennai focused hiring or something. I mean, of course, it's easier to hire because we're here from Chennai, we do it from Chennai. But generally, we try to solve for attitude and culture fit more than anything hard as a hard skill focused thing. No one outside of ISRO really knows how to build rockets. So, and even we are figuring it out because it's completely new tech that we're building. So I mean, after a couple of bad decisions on hiring, I realized that we can teach people hard skills, but not the culture fit, right? And it's not like right or wrong. It's if it doesn't work for this company, it doesn't work for this company. That's all it is. So in that sense, I've generally found the fit. I mean, I don't know if it's Chennai, but more in the south, it generally fits well for rockets, I think. Generally, I don't know why, but it happens like that. But we have also found talent across the country. And I think from a bridge between education and skill standpoint, yeah, at least for these kind of companies, people have done projects, for work with hardware, for work with software, who know what it means to get something actually working. They have that, the temperament is better suited for this kind of a work. But because you can't look for instant gratification, nothing works even in the first 2-3 attempts, right? Probably even the first 10 attempts. So if you're not already seen that, if your expectation is different, then you're going to be constantly disappointed or you're going to be constantly frustrated. So that's what we look for. So I would say there are enough polytechnic institutes, enough people with diploma degrees here, and there is a manufacturing hub in Ambattur, there is a manufacturing hub in Ikadatangal, there is a manufacturing hub further south of along OMR. So those places we get people. But that's a very different kind of set from say, if you're looking for master's degrees or PhDs, that's a different kind of background altogether that you're looking for. Chennai has been okay. I've not seen, I think getting good people and getting money always are hard for startup, right? Irrespective of where you are, that is generally a challenge. And particularly for deep tech, my learning has been solve for attitude, solve for culture fit. Hard skills, if your basics are right, they will anyway have to learn it on the job. There's no shortcut around that.
Ashwini, anything that you would want to change about the city for your in terms of your business?
See, I think I would say one of the big things that in AI
Work? Yeah. One of the big things right now with AI in 2026, right, is the speed at which things are changing is insane, right? You wake up every morning and something has come up that is like put work from a month ago irrelevant or obsolete, right? That's the speed at which the industry is moving right now. The thing about And this is not just a Chennai thing, so I think we'll have to think about what it is, because I think as a country, like, and I'm in these rooms having these conversations with the people that are trying to change and figure out what to do. SaaS has fallen behind. That is just the reality of our technology companies as a whole. As an industry, we have fallen behind to such an extent. I think that there is a big conversation going on with a bunch of us about, okay, like what happens now, right? SaaS Bhumi's entire organizational storyline was anchored around what, you know, Freshworks and Zoho and everything became this kind of big part of Chennai, right? Like, I think from an identity standpoint, SaaS was like, Chennai was called the SaaS capital of India, and then overnight you wake up and you go like, now what, right? Because they've left behind SaaS as an industry at a crazy pace. That's not to say SaaS is irrelevant, but there is a massive reinvention required. So we haven't even won that battle yet, and already the game has changed, right? So before we could arrive with SaaS, the game has changed. So now the question becomes, I think the biggest question in AI right now is, are you a consumer or are you a creator? That's it. That is the debate. And right now, the reason Anthropic just set up one of their largest offices in Bangalore is because India is being looked at as the largest consumer of AI, not as the largest, you know, like that's unfortunately the truth today. And I think that where Chennai, and in this, if you go and be in Bangalore, like it's insane, the pressure to move to Bangalore, have something happen in Bangalore, like, you know, or the valley, it's either one or the other, right? The activity and the amount of conversations, activity, events, like the work happening in Bangalore around AI is incredible. Now, we'll have to wait and see what outcome there is to all of that, right? Is it busy work versus meaningful outcomes? But I think the thing about Chennai, and I want to go back to what Gaurav said, and I was a big fan of everything he said, right? Around, there's no reason for us, we have our strengths. And I think one of the biggest strengths of Chennai is that it doesn't hustle like Bangalore. Like, let me just say it for what it's worth, right? People get out and there's art in the city, and art on scale, right? There's meaningful conversations around the intersection of art and technology and science and foundational research and the universities. There's so much going on in Chennai. We're not loud about it and we're not hustly about it. But we have our own strengths, and people are very proud about the fact that there's so much going on in their lives, and it's not very one-dimensional in that sense, right? So I think there's something to dip into. I keep going back. That's one of the reasons I came back to the city, is because it is a place that has so much to give, and it's not one-dimensional in what it offers, I think, right? And coming back to AI, unfortunately, the madness around AI is it demands this very unidimensional hustle to keep up with what's going on elsewhere. And I think the way to counter that in Chennai is to figure out how to build centers of excellence where you actually get to build. I don't think we have a foundational, outside of, let's say, IIT Madras, in a very small pockets, we don't have a build culture in Chennai. We just don't. And when I say build, I mean build foundationally, right? Where you have the software people sitting with industry experts, right? Science experts, and there are enough and more people in domains who are experts. We don't have that intersection in Chennai yet. And second, we also don't have the applied version. You can also curate. You don't have to build AI bottoms up. You can also build by curating and putting together stuff. That's another way to build AI. Unfortunately, we don't have the spaces that do both. And I would argue 10 years ago, when we were recruiting from Venkateshwara and SRM, and we've hired in Chennai. Like, we came back because that was a big part of what we wanted to do, is to hire the 1,300 people from Chennai, right? As much as possible. We kind of, strayed occasionally to Coimbatore, but that's as far as we went for the most part. And I would say, if you look at the universities and the kind of material that students graduate with today versus 10 years ago. 10 years ago, VIT's entrepreneurship cell and all the projects used to be crazy, right? Today, in the US, if you look at people applying out of undergrad or grad school, the portfolios are mind-blowing because that's where everybody is. And I would argue academia, and unfortunately, India has not kept up, right? Like, and I want to intentionally stay away from the IITs because I feel like that's what we constantly hear about. So it sounds like it, but it's not everything, right? It's a very, very tiny portion of the larger storyline. But I think that's the strength of Chennai. You have Anna University, you have, you know, the Math Institute, you have statistics, you have everything going on here, and to find a way for academia to be very tightly tied with industry, because you need domain and you need technology. These two coming together is the only way AI makes it, right? And given Chennai has its roots in manufacturing, finance and everything, the ability to bring in AI and make Chennai an applied AI hub, I think there's a huge opportunity for that.
One more question for you. I mean, it was said, and it's even said now, that one of the major issues with the city was that the entrepreneurs didn't take too many risks at some point, and deep tech would involve some deeper risks, right? I mean, is that changing? Do you see that changing? Secondly, is there a scale-up problem here? Because they seem to move to other cities to scale up.
Yeah, I think both those points are very important. I think when we started, right, we were doing AI in the cloud in 2015, right? The unit economics of doing computer vision on the cloud, like we were at like single-digit gross margins in 2015, right? Today, if you're an AI company, they expect you to have 90% plus gross margins. There's no other way to build a company in AI today because the cost of compute has fallen like to nothing, right? And we raised an insane amount of money, risk capital, as a company globally. And it didn't mean anything because the only people that won that game was AWS and the cloud guys, because that's where the money went, right? Risk capital in India, I know this has been a big bashing that has happened in the industry for the last like 5 to 6 years. Risk capital is nowhere compared to anywhere, right? But it's gotten better, right? I can today, if I look at the kind of money that people are raising, it's way more than what it was 10 years ago. So there is risk capital available. The question we should ask ourselves is, why are people leaving? Because it's nothing compared to what it is everywhere else. I think that's just the reality of, that's one piece about the risk capital. The second piece about CEOs staying here versus leaving, and the scale-up problem, that scale-up is a result of, you know how they say, you know, in San Francisco at least, you know, you'll have VCs tell you, I'm okay as long as you're in this 50-mile, there's this unsaid 50-mile radius rule, right? Because they genuinely believe that it requires building of an epicenter of some kind for that network effect to happen, right? Today, a company can become successful selling to no other city, but just in that 50-mile radius, you have companies at 100 million revenue rate because they just sold to that. And that's why they keep insisting that it's important to have this really nucleus, this epicenter of work for any industry, because there's enough money to be made over there. And unfortunately, I think the perception of Chennai is not much of an epicenter. You can't just get to that in those crazy numbers by just selling inside here itself, right? You'd have to leave. You have to go elsewhere where business is. But I think going back to my previous point, I do think there are entire domains here, like manufacturing and finance, and I think even robotics was mentioned. I think there is a path to it because hardware, Chennai is such a hardware city. I do think those opportunities are going to show up, and you can create the conditions for those opportunities to show up, right? By picking and choosing how it becomes an epicenter. I think it requires a lot of design, a lot of thought, and a lot of putting it together, but it's absolutely possible.
I saw Vishnu nodding curiously when you were making the point on risk capital. You want to add to?
Yeah, for sure. Some points very well aligned with you, but a little bit divergent points when it comes to hardware as such and how hardware innovation is seen in India as such. The point around what Ashwini was saying around, you know, we need to start thinking beyond the IITs and look for what can be built. It's not just for AI. I think for the entire deep tech innovation, the city in Chennai, we need to start building centers which will encourage people to start testing their ideas. And this is not just about, I mean, there is a huge trend across the country to establish incubators everywhere. Every engineering college now wants to set up an incubator. But, you know, there needs to be wet labs for the biotechnology folks to come and test stuff. There needs to be manufacturing, tinkering labs for even the young folks to come and just test out some facilities. Makers labs across the city, easily accessible. We need to make that ubiquitous and easily accessible. And these good labs should not be like restricted towards the top engineering or science college, not just IITs or like, you know, not just the top colleges. Even somebody who is just happen to be in a lower tier college but are in the city should have access to some of these world-class facilities. Accessing a 3D printer, how many of our engineering graduates can even operate a 3D printer, right? Like, I mean, so I think we need to have that infrastructure across a city and country in general. That's one. On the capital part, from a software side of things, what is happening in the West, in North America, yeah, there is, like, we definitely, you know, lapsed out. We missed the bus in certain sense. We really have to rush to see what can be done. But, and the kind of innovations we want to see in the AI space in particular, we honestly don't see that, not just in Chennai, but across the country. Bangalore, Delhi, Bombay, wherever it is. But where I slightly vary from the point that you say is because we serve the early stage innovation ecosystem in the larger deep tech hardware ecosystem, I think there is a lot of hope still there over there. Like, I mean, there has been a lot of grant capital going into the biotech space. The kind of innovation we are seeing in biotech life sciences, it's incredible. Like some of the innovations that are coming on to, you know, for me to evaluate, like top class in the world, top 5 of a particular kind of innovation, one of the 5 companies in the world that can do it. So there is that kind of innovation happening in biotechnology. There is a company which is building GPUs, not in Chennai though, you know, GPUs which can work with NVIDIA's stuff, CUDA, you know, technology, or there is a company which you mentioned, Stir Energy, which is incidentally, there are no Tamilians in that team. All of them studied in IIT Madras. One of them is a Guju who is refusing to go back to Gujarat. He wants to build in, you know, Chennai, to build a long duration energy storage company. And when I say long duration, they're not talking about like 8 hours to 24 hours. They are one of the 5 companies in the world which can store energy for like 6 to 8 months, electrochemical solutions to do that. There is a 400 million funded company in the US, and this 1 million we gave that company is the other one in India trying to do it. So there is that appetite. But then when it comes to risk appetite, again, the capital part, just one like, I mean, Srinath, when he first raised from us, I mean, that money, if I try to offer even a small incremental innovation in deep tech, nobody will even take it. What Agnikul took in 2017, I mean, as a fund, we can not even think of offering to even an innovation which is like 1/100th of what they are doing. Because the market has moved along for the founders to demand that, hey, I'm not coming and taking money from you if it is not a $1.5 million round. Like, and bigger rounds are happening, larger rounds are happening. It is not the same as it is in the US for sure. But there is still more capital available. There is also more grant capital available. I don't think they got any grants at the initial stages. Now there are like IDEX challenges with matching equity programs. RDI fund has been set up, which is providing money. All of my companies, and don't think they are TRL4, but all of them, they are in TRL4 to 6. We are sitting on their head to say that if you have this much capital equity raised in your bank, you will get a 3% rate loan from the TDB, the Technology Development Board. So there is capital available. It is nothing compared to what is in the US, but we are seeing that differentiated risk capital coming in. And that's probably where the city can also diversify itself. Like, how do you make that kind of capital available at cheaper rates to the startups? Like, I mean, nobody is asking for freebies. It is more smarter better designed financial instruments that can attract talent to come and sit over here. While I would want the city to be more approachable for the talent, have more public spaces. I am a climate person, but I'll advocate ACs everywhere over here in the city, right? But with all of that in around, but we need to be more creative in bringing that differentiated capital and be the source of that differentiated capital, also be the source of that differentiated infrastructure. If Chennai can differentiate itself as a city which will provide infrastructure at the lowest level. I mean, early stage companies don't have access to infrastructure. And if you are the source where this is the only place in the world you can test a particular thing in biotech, where else will I go if I'm the biotech company? I'll come here. I'll set my base over here, and I'm stuck here. You should make them stuck into the city, along with the corporate, tie-ups that was also mentioned.
Final thoughts, AJ?
No, I'd agree with many of your points about capital, right? And one of the things that I was hoping would come up is also like endurance. Like, for example, I want to bat back to life science because, great tech, we can build all of it. But the truth is, we're all going to age and we are all going to get sick. And with an ailing population that is of the size of the entire United States, you're going to need like foresight to both understand what's happening in the human body and to also be able to treat what's happening in the human body. And that requires a lot of patient capital. And that's not necessarily on the order of years, sometimes even decades. Like a development of a single drug, it takes about $2 billion, $1 to $2 billion over 15 years. It doesn't necessarily have to. There are a lot of things, the companies that start today can accelerate that dramatically, but still that foresight and being able to deal with a failure rate of 90% is required. And the key differentiator, back to where I started, for a place like Chennai, is the talent capital. And when we pair it with domain knowledge that was mentioned earlier, right? And Chennai, Tamil Nadu, is a place where you have both engineering talent and there's also medicine talent. The state with one of the largest number of medical colleges is Tamil Nadu. People are flying from abroad to get treated here. So if we can marry the strengths across the two, right? And places are doing that actively. You can have even the talent pools from both places building AI in healthcare, AI for drug discovery. And when you have the government supporting something like that actively, you can make it happen. So in a nutshell, I'd say, we've heard about, Vadivelu saying, building strong basement weak. So the talent is strong. The specialized talent is where there's some weakness, and I hope that's something that we can all build up and grow success from.
Thanks a lot.
I'd like to request Mr. Rathod to please present our panelists with a token of appreciation, starting with Mr. Vishnu Rajiv, Investment Partner, Special Invest. Can we have a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen? Ms. Ashwini Asokan, Founder and CEO, Mad Street 10. Mr. Srinath Ravichandran, Co-Founder and CEO, Agnikul Cosmos. Dr. AJ Venkatakrishnan, Senior Vice President, AI Partnerships, Inference. And our moderator, Mr. Sriram Srinivasan, editorial consultant, former group digital editor, The Hindu Group. Thank you so much. Can we have a group photo? A big